Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Latino Vote podcast. My name is Chuck Rocha, and I am joined by my brother, Mike Madrid. How are you doing, Mike?
Good, Chuck. Good to see you. This year has started rather quickly. I'm excited about a lot of what we've got lined up, and I'm looking forward to jumping right into this with you.
I can't believe that it is the end of January. It's like we just looked up here, and January is gone, which for all of you at home means, guess what? We ain't that far away from primaries again, boys and girls, and that's what we're going to be talking about this week on the Latino Vote podcast. Mike, anything shaking in California we should be aware of?
Well, there's a lot of discussion about the Senate campaign. Senator Dianne Feinstein, of course, is kind of heading into amazing Californian, by the way, Dianne Feinstein. Look, I'm a Republican. I've done campaigns against her for many years, knowing we were going to lose. She's the consummate Californian, but her time obviously I think has passed here. I'm hoping that she will do the right thing as Pelosi and others have done and hand the torch to the next generation, which causes an intergenerational scramble, right? So in the Democratic primary, because whoever comes out of that primary is going to win that race. And in California, you're going to have Democrats of kind of every stripe in every column and every lane. Katie Porter has already jumped into this. Adam Schiff is going to jump into this. Barbara Lee has already postured and said that she's going to jump into this. I think Rochana's got to take a quick look at it. You might know more about it than that. There's got to be a Latino candidate in the offings. There's every strain of the Democratic Party is going to be looking at a lane here, and I think it's going to be a big field. I think it's going to be a vibrant field. I think it's going to be a very active, exciting race.
I think you're right. And I think we're going to talk this year a lot about California, because California, not only with this Senate race, but we keep talking about these three congressionals, and that's just three of those congressionals, which is California 13, which is a Duarte seat. Again, I give Mike Madrid credit telling me about that one. I was like, what seat? Who? And then Republicans end up winning a seat that's 50% Latino that Joe Biden carried by 8 points. Then there's the 22nd congressional district with our boy Valadeo. And then California 27 is going to be news. I think we're going to want to break some news on the Latino vodcast in the coming weeks. Me and Mike's been talking to Latinos out there in that area that are thinking about running. Folks have started reaching out to me and to Mike, looking at running in those races. And coming up soon, I think there's going to be interesting to see in all of those. We could have a Democratic Latino candidate well positioned in the primary, probably in all three of those seats. And I would be remiss probably not to say that those three seats will probably determine if Democrats win back the House with a handful of other seats. We keep talking about the 18. But if Democrats can't win these three seats in California, it's going to be hard to see the math, right, Mike, to win those in other places. You know those seats better than I do.
I mean, I think so. I think that's right. I think, look, California, it's such a deep blue state. We're not really considered much in the math of things anymore. But there are so many competitive seats, and the margins are so thin in the House that I think you're exactly right. You've got to take a look at California to get a sense as to whether or not some of these states are going to be in play. You and I were talking about this Duarte seat where the Republicans were telling me, little birds chirping in my ear, saying, our polling looks really good. We're moving Hispanic numbers. Everything you've been saying on this podcast, we've been listening in, and is exactly right. We're doing what you and Chuck are saying. And they snuck up and stole one from the Democrats. Now, that's going to be a competitive seat. Good chance it comes back to the Democrats, especially in a presidential year. But the Republicans they've got the keystone, man. They know how to do it now. And I'm not saying they're going to keep that seat. I'm not saying they're not. But what I'm saying is they're learning. They're figuring this out, and it's working. Probably because you and I have been talking about it publicly for the past few years. Valadeo, I think you're exactly right. And Mike Garcia's seat, that's a suburban college-educated voter base where Mike Garcia's Republican has done well with Latinos. A Democratic Latino has to win that seat if Democrats are going to hold it. They could win it in an anomalous year, but to hold it for 10 years until the next redistricting, you've got to have a Latino Democrat win that seat.
Ain't that where didn't you grow up around the 27th where it is?
I'm right next door to it now. I grew up in a little city called Moore Park, just about 5-6 miles outside of the 27th Congressional District. I did my first congressional campaigns, which used to be half of that district. Those are my parts. Those are my people. I know that district very, very well. And it has changed a little bit, like everything. I'm an old man now, but everything has changed going into especially this last redistricting. But it's a much more competitive seat than it should be. I think the Democrats have made a really big mistake by putting up a very weak candidate in Christy Smith. Nothing personal, but they should have picked up that seat in 2 of the last 3 elections, and they have not.
And that seat was that with a Congresswoman Hill had to resign because of a scandal as well?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's winnable, right? It's winnable. Right. A Democrat can win that seat. But again, like I said, it's the right combination. You need a Latino Democrat with some central, centrist bona fides.
Yeah, probably with some military background, probably has some business experience, but then also very pro-worker.
Yeah, you get all that, and I think this is an extraordinarily competitive seat for Democrats. I think it is on paper anyway, a better candidate than what the Democrats have put up, and I think they can bring that home. We'll just have to wait and see as it gets closer.
We're going to have a whole bunch of time to talk about these House races. Today, though, is going to be about the Senate. But before we get to the Senate, we always like to start these podcasts with the news of the day. We've got what's going on in California. What's going on in Washington, D.C., where I'm at today, is there's lots of craziness. There are folks who are staked out outside of George Santos's congressional office trying to get him to say something. I want to get Mike's opinion on that. But then also today in Washington, D.C., or it might have been yesterday, Kevin McCarthy kicked a couple Democrats, 2 of those California Democrats, Mike Madrid, off of really important national security committee. So the press is talking about that. And then also this year, we'll probably spend a little time talking about these mayor's races. That's going on. And in Chicago, you have Chuy Garcia running against Lori Lightfoot, Willie, and a bunch of other folks up there. And that primary for all of you folks, and we probably should talk about this in the next week or two, that first primary is February the 24th. We're not working on that race with my firm. But the final, if you don't get 50%, which is going to be really tough, there's a runoff, Mike, I think 30 or 40 days later. I'm going up to Chicago February the 17th to talk to Dr. Juan Andrade's group up there, the Hispanic Council of Leadership, where he does a bunch of young Latinos. So I'm going to go up to Chicago. But in Washington, D.C., it's all been about Kevin McCarthy, what's going on. And the other thing that's been going on, and we should probably clear the air right now, Mike, is it seems like everybody of any importance, and you're probably the most important person that I know, seems to have classified documents at their home. I needed to check to see, do you have any that you need to get out in the open about right now?
I don't, and I think I'm probably the only person who's being honest by saying I don't, because everybody who knows me knows that they would not trust me with any important information, let alone top secret or classified information. So even if I wanted to have access to that stuff, no way they're giving it to Mike Madrid. So I can say quantifiably, I don't have any documents. Chuck, how about you?
Look, I would be the guy, to be honest, who would have some documents, because my team, who is a bunch of young Gen Zers and whatever the gens are, A, B, and C and all that. I don't even know how it is. I just know that I'm old and they're young, and they make fun of me because I still print out emails and file them in a filing cabinet next to my office so I can find them. And today, for all of you watching online, I have my printed out Senate thing to talk about that's got hand scribbled notes that Mike Madrid is used to seeing me do, because it makes me feel more comfortable than looking at my phone, which I've gotten so old I can't see all the time.
Poor Gen Z, they got to deal with us old folks. And it's like, can you print that out? Can you print that out? And they're like, why are we printing all this stuff out? And they're realizing, oh my God, like they need this stuff in hard copy, like on stone tablet, to kind of read this old stuff. So yeah, but I'm grateful for that, Chuck, because you do put a hell of a lot of work into this in looking at all of the seats that we're going to do a little examination on. And I just want to give a little shout out to your Gen Z crew there, who puts up with those old guys that have to look at this stuff on paper.
They do a great job. Before we talk about the Senate races, and we're going to go through them all today, because this week the Cook Report and the Sabado Crystal Ball put out their power rankings for these 24 Senate races. And we're going to move around every week. This week we're going to talk about the Senate, and we'll talk about the Senate a lot. And then weeks past, there'll be a presidential primary we'll be talking about. There'll be Iowa caucuses, maybe, probably not. There'll be Georgia race. All this stuff is going to be happening. We don't even have to talk about the issues today. Let's jump into the Senate races. Let me give Mike the overview real quick of what folks should know is going to happen in the Senate races, and not what's going to win or who's going to lose, but you should know what is up. Every year, for all of you who may not be political animals like me and Mike Madrid, every 2 years, there's about 30 Senate seats that are up, and they have a 6-year term. So every 2 years, there's a different group up for reelection, to where there's normally of 33 seats that are up. 33, as you can see, every 2 years would give you a 6-year cycle. And this year, the map, quote unquote, looks horribly bad for Democrats. And let me explain what that means. What that means is 6 years ago, let's close your eyes, go back in time, think about where you were 6 years ago. You don't have to think about your ex-boyfriend or your ex-girlfriend or your mama in your ass about something. Think about where you were 6 years ago. So 6 years ago, Mike, it would have been 24. It would have been 18. It would have been 2018 were the midterms 6 years ago. Let's think what was happening. Donald Trump had just been elected president. And what does me and Mike Madrid talk about on this podcast? We talked about it the entire last year, which was this huge, with the capital H, off-year voter turnout that happened in 2018. The highest voter turnout in an off-year election for the last 100 years as a percentage of the population. It didn't even get close. On average, it was 17 to 20% higher in almost every single state. Well, what did that mean? People were pissed that Donald Trump had been elected, and this was their first time to vote since then. So guess what, y'all? A lot of Democrats won states that were purple or lean red, and now they have to defend those states 6 years later. And let me give you some quick examples. The Cook Political Report says that there are 11 seats that will be held by Republicans that they have to defend. And get this, there are 20 seats that Democrats have to defend. But here's the biggest difference for those of you at home. Of the 11 seats that the Republicans have to defend, all of them are in states that are comfortably red. There's not even any Republican Senate states or senators that are in competitive seats. The Cook Report puts one Senate seat that's in the likely Republican category. All the other 10 are what they consider safe Republicans. Mike, could you even guess who they picked for their one Republican?
Boy, that's a good question. I'm going to say Josh Hawley.
I would have picked the same one, Mike. That's funny that you said that because I played this game with my staff and I picked Josh Hawley. But Cook says it's Rick Scott in Florida.
Yeah. I think Rick's probably okay, right? Florida, we can talk about Florida all day long. I know we talked to one of our friend reporters this morning, Stephanie Ataladrid, who did a great column for the New Yorker on Florida, probably one of the best pieces that I've seen to this point. We should probably post that in the show just to give her a little bit of coverage on some of the great work she's doing. But if that's the best shot, at a pickup on an incumbent Republican for the Democrats, then buckle up your seats, boys and girls, because Chuck's going to run through a list right now that's going to scare you. It's going to keep you up at night.
If you're a Democrat, you probably want to turn the podcast off right now because I'm going to talk about the seats that we have to defend. Now, first of all, there's about 10 seats of the 20 that are in fact, safe seats for Democrats. There's the California seat, there's Connecticut, there's Delaware, there's all the Democratic seats. But I'm not even going to go through those. What I'm going to talk about are the 4 true toss-ups, Cook says is toss-ups. And there are another 5 that they say barely lean Democrat that I swear to God, when I say these, Mike Madrid's going to be like, just like Chuck Rocha did, I'm going to say, nah, those are toss-ups. I don't care even if they nominate a crazy MAGA Republican. It's going to take a lot of work to keep these. So first of all, we're going to go from the Democratic seats that they're saying lean just a little bit Democrat, and then we'll go to the toss-ups. And of the ones that they say lean Democrat a little bit is the open Michigan race. I agree with that. It's the Montana seat with Tester. Power of incumbency, I assume, Mike.
He's a popular guy. I mean, Tester's well known. People like John Tester, Montana.
Yep. He's like we'll get to Joe Manchin, but he's like Joe Manchin. Next is, oh my God, we have a year and a half to talk about this, Mike Madrid. The Nevada Senate seat with Rosen. Back to Nevada. Yep.
We should take a little Vegas trip and do a remote Latino Vote podcast from Nevada.
Oh, you know what I just thought about, Mike?
Yeah.
This is me and you doing a business meeting now on the podcast, but Campaign and Elections, L2, one of the sponsors, is doing their Read Awards in March in Las Vegas. It's the quick flight from Sacramento. I'm bringing out the team. we should do a podcast from Vegas at the Reed Awards.
I think we should do that. Heck, flight, man. It's a road trip, man. It's a road trip to Vegas. Let's do it. Old school.
And you get to see Luis and Daisy and the whole team. We'll be there.
Let's do it. Let's do it on site. We'll record from the campaigns and elections with our L2 sponsor. That's
exactly what we'll do. We can get little drinks with umbrellas in them. We'll do the whole thing. Okay, so Nevada is on the lean Democrat. The next one is Pennsylvania. Bob Casey. Mm-hmm. He's been diagnosed with cancer, but he hasn't said if he's going to run for re-election. But again, a toss-up. But me and Mike will continue to say to all of you, it's different this year because it's a presidential. Mm-hmm. It don't make it completely different. It's just a little bit different on turnout in these states with this presidential turnout. And the last one on the lean, Mike, is the Wisconsin seat that the Republicans just won that we thought they might lose with Mandela. So of these, which ones really stand out to you, the ones, and do you agree with me on these lean Democratic seats?
I think that they're mostly lean D. I'm going to withhold judgment on Wisconsin right now, and I'm going to tell you why. Wisconsin, I think, is truly the most competitive state in the country. It's just so evenly split that I think you just the nuances and the dynamics of each and every race, and this is going back to the Scott Walker, Congressman Paul Ryan days. When they were shutting down the state government, Wisconsin has the perfect petri dish of non-college educated rural whites. We've discussed on the show there are now more Latino voters than African-American voters, all of which is to say there's a lot of black and brown voters combined together, which overwhelmingly benefits Democrats. But you also have a lot of college-educated whites, especially around the Madison area, University of Wisconsin. So you've got this perfect – Wisconsin is kind of a microcosm of the country. Like if you think about it, 350 million votes cast or 180 million, whatever our votes cast are, and it comes down to 1 or 2 points in the popular vote, 2-3 points. Wisconsin's even closer than that. It's like America, only more. And that Wisconsin, I'm not even comfortable saying it's a lean D. I think it's a true toss-up in the truest sense of the word. I think Pennsylvania has a darker blue strain than we have given it credit for. I think that we're still in this kind of post-traumatic stage after 2016 when Trump shocked the world and picked it up. Yes, they're close races, but it's still I think in a pretty significant blue range. I still am a believer that that's a blue state. And then you can't look, Montana's a red state. It just is. But with John Tester, he's like Manchin. We'll get to that in a second too, I know. But the thing about this year, Chuck, the thing about this year is so much of this is going to rely on the local quality of candidates and what's happening on the ground in these areas that there's just no accounting for these national trends anymore. In your generation, in my generation, we always, acknowledged and subscribed to the Tip O'Neill adage that all politics is local. I've pushed back and said not anymore. All politics is now national. I'm going to put in a little caveat on that. A Mike Madrid corollary saying all politics is national except for this year when it's going to be local because you can't account for the strength of a tester. You can't account for the dynamics in Arizona, which we're going to talk about. You can't account for Wisconsin, which is more unique than any other states. It just doesn't follow those trend lines, or maybe it follows them more so. I don't know. We're going to be doing a deep dive into these as we go. But I think more than not, the way you characterize these as lean Ds are good, but still a lot of red flags on the horizon for Democrats looking to defend.
I should also give a caveat that these are this way if things stay the way they are. All of you should understand that if these incumbents, and none of them have announced they're running for re-election except for Kane in Virginia, who is not on this list, Mike, he's considered a safe Democratic seat in a state that used to be a swing state for y'all.
Yeah.
But if Tester don't run, if Bob Casey don't run, if some of these folks don't run, this whole thing moves one notch to the right. They all become swings, except for Montana, that I would say moves 2 notches to the right and moves to likely Republican, right, Mike?
That's exactly right. And in fact, I mean, let me back up here a little bit at risk of kind of slowing down a great conversation that's heating up. there's a very good chance that the Republicans take the Senate. Very good chance, odds-on chance the Republicans take the Senate. And I think it's an equally good chance that the Democrats take the House. So we may be seeing a switch, a reversal of both houses of Congress here. I remain bullish, by the way, on Democrats keeping the White House. I mean, we've talked about that a little bit. I really do believe that will be the case. It's just a historical trend line. It's very, very solid. The fundamentals are there. The Republicans have lost their mind. We'll talk about George Santos, I think, later in the show, too. Guys like that really help the Democrats' cause. They want him there. Democrats want George Santos in office. But I think there's a good chance that the Democrats pick up the Senate or lose the Senate and pick up the House, and the Republicans lose the Senate or lose the House and pick up the Senate.
Well, when we are, and the production team at Candor is going to like this, when we are doing this show live from Las Vegas in March, we probably should put some money down on something while we're out there on because I think I would back that play. And as they say in my world, I would double down on that. So let's talk about the 3 seats that are in the pure toss-up compared. Again, these are Cook Political Reports, Dave Wasserman and crew over at the Cook Political Report that we hope to have on the show sometime soon. I'm going to do these in reverse and save one for the end that I know Mike wants to talk about, and I'll give a disclaimer on. First is West Virginia. We talked about Joe Manchin. We're going to say that this is the same as the John Tester seat. It's funny to me, though, that they have this one as a toss-up and the Tester seat as a lean D. It's something for all of you analysts at home to think about. Joe Manchin, if he decides, and he hasn't said he's going to seek re-election, Joe Manchin, this seat goes away. I don't care who they run. There's nobody in West Virginia that can hold this seat. And this doesn't move 2 notches. It moves to the safe column if Joe Manchin don't run. The next one, and Mike Madrid is going to love to talk about this one. We'll talk about it a lot, is Ohio and Sherrod Brown. Sherrod Brown is a progressive, liberal, labor Democrat in a toss-up seat. This is his 3rd term. Ironically, I heard this morning, Mike, that he has hired a campaign manager 2 years out already. He's getting ready to do this thing and do the work that he knows he's going to have to do. He's got to bring over a lot of those white, blue-collar steel workers and auto workers if he's going to have re-election. And then lastly, we'll talk about this, is Arizona and Kyrsten Sinema, who has just said she's no longer a Democrat. She's going to be an independent, and she hasn't said if she's going to run as an independent. She just said she is going to be an independent now. Ruben Gallego had a launch this week. And again, here on this podcast, this ain't about saying great things about all of Chuck Roach's clients, but I do work for Ruben Gallego. And folks should know for the rest of the podcast, this is going to be a late summer primary next year. Ruben is my friend. I've been very open about that. Ruben runs BOLPAC for the Hispanic Caucus. BOLPAC is my client. Ruben is my client. And I worked with an amazing group of people on a launch ad that we rolled out on Monday that I want to get Mike Madrid's take on. But I do think Ruben positions himself well in that Arizona race, and there's lots of moving parts there. Mike, what do you think about these 3 Senate races?
Well, look, I mean, West Virginia is West Virginia, right? I think you said it right. Without Joe Manchin, that's one of the rubiest, reddest states in America. And I know Manchin comes with a lot of criticism and a lot of baggage because of the way he plays the game, but I just don't think that there's any other way to play it if you're going to be a Democrat in West Virginia. I just don't. I learned as a very young man in this business that the most important vote you take is the vote for leadership at the beginning of each Congress. And if you don't have a majority, it doesn't matter what any other bill, you're trying to push, what other vote count is going to be required. If you don't have a majority, it doesn't matter. And so the Democrats need Manchin. I know they've got a love-hate relationship with him. We'll talk about Sinema in just a second. But the truth of the matter is, as long as he's got a D in front of his name, you want him in your caucus. You want him in your conference. Because if you lose that vote on a 51-49 split, you're not in a great position. Yeah, there's a tie for vice president. But to your point, if any one of those in the lean D category goes down, and these true toss-ups are a coin toss, you're talking about losing the majority, okay? And that's just not where you want to be. So Manchin, you got to double down with the Democrat. I don't know what he does. He is also facing there's another old West Virginia old former governor, popular as day in that state. I don't remember his name, but he's posturing to run as a Republican. I think it's probably a tighter race for Manchin than he would like. I'm not too sure what wily old Joe Manchin does, but I do think that he knows the state. He knows his people. They know him. They like him. They give him a hell of a lot of leash because that is one conservative state. And I think if there's any one state that is the home of non-college educated whites, it's West Virginia, for God's sakes. And you got to take what you can get in this business sometimes. Let's talk a little bit about Arizona. Look. Arizona is a state that has been trending blue for some time. It's happening by drips and drabs. Latino voters in Arizona are very much like California voters. They're pretty rock solid in their partisan break, and it's a 70-30 Democratic advantage. There's a whole lot of reasons for that. We're going to spend a lot of time on this podcast talking about that over the next 18 months. But a lot of this goes back to the politicization that happened under Joe Arpaio and some of the racial profiling bills, Jan Brewer's attacks on the Latino community. You have an entire generation of Latinos that became political because the community was under attack. Ruben Gallegos has been at the forefront of that. His timing, I think, is absolutely impeccable on taking on Sinema, who's really dug her own grave. I think it's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out. She's got by hook and by crook, she's going to try to hold on to that and play both sides and both parties against each other in this really convoluted attempt to hold on to that seat. Maybe. I also don't know if she sticks it out. If her numbers are bad enough, maybe she doesn't stick it out. Ruben has staked strong claim to that seat. I think even if it is open, it may or may not be, but I think if it is open, the field essentially clears for him. I will say this, and I think this audience knows, I'm very candid in my assessment and my analysis. I'm not here to kind of puff up Chuck Rocha's feathers any more than they already are.
Come on, man. I need it. I'm fragile. Yeah. Fragile over here.
Well, here's what I'm going to say. I think the ad that Ruben Gallegos launched was the best introduction ad I have seen in the last 5 years coming from the Democrats. And I think, and this is a big statement, this is probably the best Latino messaging I have seen from either party since the George W. campaigns in 2000, 2004, where you get a real sense not only of the candidate and the biography, but you are able to just really feel a working class voter that believes in a certain set of values that defines blue collar America in a way that very few ads are able to capture. I did not know that you were doing this work, Chuck. I did get probably 5 or 6 separate texts from people who don't know you and don't know a lot of our work together, but know my area, my specialties, folks from Lincoln Project days, folks from DC, folks from California saying, have you seen this ad? And we're going to put this, by the way, we're going to embed this ad, Chuck, whether you like it or not. We're going to lead the newsletter by shooting out this ad. If you're not subscribing to our newsletter, by the way, you're missing out on half of the show here. So you should be going to Latinos.vote, subscribe to the newsletter. Okay. We're going to be putting out this ad, which ran in English and in Spanish. This is exactly what I believe. And I have been saying, for those of you that have been following, and Chuck, and I agree and disagree on some things. He approaches it because of the man he is, his history, the childhood he had, the labor background he comes from, more than any other Latino Democrat. I would argue even non-Latino Democrat. He's just the last of these labor Democrats who are saying, well, we need to get back to being a working man's party. If the Democrats do this type of thing, they're going to be just fine. And I think Gallego, again, Ruben understands it intuitively. It's his story. It's his people. If he leans into that, I think you're going to see a 70-30 split again in Arizona, with him running against whoever they're going to run against him. They're already Blake Masters is already squabbling with Ruben on Twitter, and I love it. That's a race I would love to see. I think Ruben wins that one going away. Maybe not double digits, but pretty damn close. I think this state is very much in transition. I've always believed since the 2020 cycle that this is a seat that is in a stronger Democratic position than it appears on paper. I think that proved out in 2018, big Democratic year. It proved out in 2020, a split year where Biden picks up the state. And I think it proved out again in the 2022 cycle when Democrats not only hold off a red wave nationally, but pick up in red states like Arizona when they nominated crazies like Carrie Lake and Blake Masters. I think Ruben is the future. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. I love hearing him. I love all Latinos talking about blue collar working class messages because that's where our people are at. If you have not seen that ad, it's a preview of coming attractions, not just for him and his campaign and not just for Arizona. It is literally the template for the way you message nationally into the Latino vote. So we'll put this out. Subscribe to the newsletter. We're going to be putting out some of the best Latino-focused, Latino-themed ads. Make sure you're getting that subscription, but we'll be putting it on the website too, just so that you get a good flavor for what it is I'm talking about. And again, tell me if I'm right or wrong, Chuck, but you and I spoke that morning. I got some of those texts, and I sent you a text and saying, holy shit, dude, if this was you, this is great work. And you were like, yeah, that was me. Don't need you saying that, Madrid. I know what the hell I'm doing. And I was like, you're going to hit 1 million views today. You will hit 1 million. You hit 1 million views on your launch ad, folks, and you knocked over the internet, and you guys hit 1 million. And I just think it was awesome. I think 27,000 or something new individual contributions, raised over $1 million. I mean, you can't ask for a better launch ad. And it's not just because of who he is. That ad, I think, really, really brought it home. So I'm hoping he's appreciating and understanding your work, because you did a phenomenal job there.
Well, I'm not going to take credit for all of it. I'm appreciative of your kind words, and I want all of you to check the ad out. It was a labor of love, not from me, but from the entire Solidarity team, the WIN team, the New Deal team, the Aisle 518 team. Like, all of us put input into that thing. It was a total group effort. Wonderful production by the WIN team, and capturing that. And I remember, and y'all know me, and I can't hide from who I am on this podcast, but I met Ruben probably 13 years ago, and I was thinking about writing a book back then about how me as a Mexican redneck was an oddity. And then after I had met all these Latinos around, I realized I was an oddity in an ocean of oddities, that everybody had a story. And so I started interviewing people that I had met and recording their interviews on one of these little tape recorders. And Ruben came to my office, a freshman congressman. He showed up at my office, for God's sakes, and he told me his story. And it was from that point forward, I fell in love with him. And what stuck with me was him talking about growing up with a single mom, like I did, in this poor part of Chicago, and him having to sleep on a couch every night because he had 3 sisters and they only had 1 bedroom. So all the girls slept together in 1 bedroom, and he slept every night in the living room on the couch because he was the boy of the family while his mama worked, right? And it was those things that, when we were thinking about the vision of this ad, a lot of us have that story of things that we've been through, and how do you make that real? We didn't have to talk about Kyrsten Sinema. We didn't have to talk about cutting Medicare and Social Security. We can get to all of that. But the first thing I needed to do, what we needed to do, what the WIN Company, what Rebecca Katz, what all these people that are amazing folks around Ruben wanted to do, was let him be himself. And that's what we wanted the ad to be. A lot of that ad is Ruben himself saying, this is what I want to say. Obviously, with us going, how do you tell that story? So for all of you operatives out there who's got a bunch of white consultants around you in a place where a Latino vote's going to be really heavy, lean into what me and Mike's been talking about, which is the story and the narrative that combines us, which is our work. Whether you go to work every day in a sports jacket or you go to work every day putting on a pair of work gloves, you have to work to provide for your family. And if you're speaking to that, I really am going to see with this campaign, with an amazing team. Again, this ain't Chuck Rocha. This is a bunch of talented folks. I'm just honored to be one of the people at the table. I think that's where we're going to get to. We're going to have Ruben on the show. I'm excited to have Ruben on the show to talk to a lot of you, to give us his vision. But I will tell you, within the first 24 hours, to Mike's credit, we had over 1 million views. We raised over $1 million. And get this, y'all, 27,000 individual contributions in the first 24 hours. That broke the Senator Kelly record 3 times, what he had done. And we love Senator Kelly. Just giving some comparisons. And Mike Madrid, for all of you watching and for all of you listening, I'll give you a little inside scoop. You listen to the Latino Vote podcast, you heard it first here, that over 40% of the contributions, and I think it was just below 40%, in the high 30s, came from Arizona. So you want to talk about building a grassroots army? If you got somebody who's giving you $5, you know they're going to vote for you. So we're building something there. So that was really the most impressive thing, was like around 30% of the donors were from in-state. As much as Kyrsten Sinema is hated nationally, you think they hate her in Arizona. White liberals in San Francisco and New York really effing hate her. So we did something special there, Mike. I didn't know. I let that out of the bag. But for those of you listening to the Latino Vote podcast, this is the information you get by listening to the podcast. You may never know what you may come up with, Mike. What do you think?
No, I think, I think that's exactly right. That's why our listeners listen to us. They're getting not only some deep insight on some of these key races and some of the demographics, but they're really getting the insight of why we're approaching the races that we are. We're these small, narrow niche lanes that used to be there as Latinos. when you and I were first starting out, Chuck, are now these kind of big 3-lane highways. And they're central to Democratic victories. They're central to Republican victories. Each party is having to make the adjustment. My party, the Republican Party especially, is kind of like there's still the handful of guys kicking and screaming and just saying, let's just, I can understand the Latino vote. And every once in a while they'll pull off some sort of random victory. But the truth of the matter is, if it's not central to who you are in the community, you're not going to go very far. You're not going to get anywhere. And watching what Ruben Gallegos is going to do, not just in Arizona, but I think this guy has the potential to raise money in probably 5 or 6 different markets in California. He will also go into Nevada and raise money. Alex Padilla is going to be raising money for him. Cortez Masto is going to be raising money for him. Menendez is going to be raising for him. This guy's going to have probably the largest Latino network nationally this cycle, because it's also got the Latino vote's going to be galvanized for the presidential race. So, there's every time I keep thinking like it's finally here, it's as big as it's going to be for a while, I realize, no, it's not. It's starting to grow exponentially. And the networking that's going on and the people reaching across the aisle to help out, other Latinos is just getting bigger. And that's leveraging the strength of the vote. And so more than any other race, that's the one I'm watching because of the inter-party dynamics that are going on, because it's Arizona, because the Latino vote is so dynamic there, because you've got this candidate who can really, I think, redefine an aspirational working class Latino narrative for the country at a moment when the vote really needs that. I think there's just huge opportunities. And that's more than any other race. I'm glad you're there because I want to get all the inside scoop on this, by the way, and find out what's really going on.
I got to watch myself, make sure I don't let my big mouth get me in trouble.
Yeah.
Again,
don't send anything classified.
I don't want to give a number to the number of donations from Arizona, but it was well over a quarter of the donations. We'll leave it there for any of you press that are listening because it hasn't been public. Over a quarter of the donations came directly from Arizona, which is crazy if you think about it. That's thousands of people.
That's staggering. Hundreds. That's staggering. But like I said, when I saw that video, I mean, folks, just to put this in perspective, like you hit 1 million views a day. I mean, you're doing something. Okay. And the first day of launch. And I'm sure there's an operation built around it, but I don't care. You can't get 1 million views unless it's quality ads. And it's just such a good national narrative, not just for the Gallegos campaign, which it clearly is, but I think for the whole Latino agenda. And I think that Democrats are talking about it in a way that is aspirational and exciting for me. I think if Republicans start talking about that, then boy, we're going to have a real competitive fight for our community's votes, and that's healthy. That's a healthy thing. I'm looking forward to it.
This is going to be a real case study for me and you who are super nerds to think about, because if you listen to the podcast and you're a student of politics like me and Mike, there's 3 things we didn't talk about in Arizona, which helps this case study. What does the Latino surname mean for Ruben Gallego? Gallego is a very common Latino name. Well, the highest vote getter in the last off-year election was a guy named Adrian Fontes, who ran for Secretary of State, who overperformed almost every Democrat, even Mark Kelly. The Fontes Latino surname, I will say, I can't back this up, but seems to me it helped him overperform everybody. Gallego having a surname. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. The second thing is a lot of Latinos joined the military just like Ruben did. And Ruben would be, this is for you history buffs, he would be the only U.S. sitting senator who is an enlisted person who saw active combat in war. So he is not an officer. He went in as an enlisted soldier, as a volunteer. It means he was a grunt for all of you who haven't done this. And he was in the Marines. So I have footage of him going door to door in Iraq and taking fire. He was I shouldn't say a real soldier. Everybody who defends our honor is real. But let's just say if you read his book, you can see how much combat and firepower he was under. He saw some of the worst. And guess what he was doing? Defending our freedom. Let's see if that narrative is going to work. Case study again. And then I think the last piece of this will be the money being spent. You know, it's going to be a lot of money that he's going to raise. There's going to be a lot of outside money. So it's going to be a case study. And that leads me into where I want to take this conversation about the Senate. I've broken the Senate down, and I want to get Mike's input here in 3 categories, Mike. I'm going to call it, because this is the Latino Vote podcast, the Latino Vote core states. There are 2 of those that are beyond shadow of a doubt, which are Nevada and Arizona, just like last year. So many Latinos, huge part of the electorate, playing a big role. And because Pennsylvania is so big and because the population is so big, I've moved Pennsylvania into the core state because there are so many Latinos there. That's the core. Next will be the Latino influencer, where there's lots of Latinos in states that matter, which are Michigan, Wisconsin, and Ohio. We're going to talk a lot about Latinos in Ohio because nobody talks about them, but me and Mike know there's a lot of them there. And then the wild card that really is going to be interesting to me, then I'll stop and get to Mike, is Montana, because Montana's largest minority is Hispanic voters. And if you look around the service sector of Montana and who's doing the work there, the Latino vote now, it's starting to look a little bit, not quite there like North Carolina, where all these immigrants moved there and now their kids are coming of age, right? So, Mike, that's where I think we're going to talk about the Latino vote having an impact this year. Would you have me move any of those around?
No, I wouldn't. But in fact, we're talking about Ohio, and we were talking about this a lot too. Tim Ryan, the numbers he moved against J.D. Vance were overwhelming. Working class Latinos really moved into the Democratic column in a year where Democrats fell short. Again, Ohio is a very, very tough state for Democrats. I think it's tougher than it looks on paper. There is no way to get there without a dramatic overperformance of working class Hispanic precincts. That's what Ryan saw. Wasn't enough to get there, but it's a necessary part of that coalition. Same thing that's going to happen in Montana. Tester's going to have to be looking for some expertise, has to be looking for high performance, has to be looking for higher turnout from these voters. Get this, remember this. These voters are not built into voter models. Neither party is building these into voter models because they're too new of voters. They're not demonstrating what we call the propensity or the likelihood to show up. If you've only voted once, we're not targeting you in the same way that we are targeting a voter who's voted in 3 of the last 4 elections or 4 of the last 4 elections. These are newer voters. And I know this sounds kind of in the weeds and arcane, two political consultants, arguing over the size of what wrench we need to use under the hood here. And it is, but it makes a big, big difference. Okay. There has been an error made by both parties over the last 20 years. I have seen both parties make this mistake of not adjusting their voter models to accommodate the 1, 2, 3 percentage point growth of new voters because they're not on the old voter file. Okay? That's a mistake. And it's a really big mistake where the vote is significant, where it's measurable, and where it's recently migrated. And Montana is a perfect case study to that effect. Now, Pennsylvania, Chuck's been at the cutting edge of this stuff, and he did a lot of great work for Fetterman and the Fetterman campaign independently on this stuff. Pennsylvania is going to become a Latino battleground state. I'm going to say it already is, but every year it's only going to get bigger, right? Just natural growth, math. You hear me talk about this a lot. A lot more 18-year-olds are coming online that happen to be Latino, and there's a lot of old white people that are passing away. Overwhelmingly, again, white folks. So the numbers there, just through natural attrition, are making Pennsylvania a more Latino state, and that's critical to the margins in a lot of those places where Chuck has worked. And some of it's organized, labor members that are working in some of these blue collar industries that built Pennsylvania. But there's also a lot of recently migrated, recently naturalized folks that are coming there, going to be voting and mobilized for the first time that again are not appearing in voter models. And voter modeling is a skill, and I think in many ways it's a lost art. It was the first job that I had, is I had to sit down there with the old guys, that would show me how to actually build a voter model and build a roadmap to victory, literally vote by vote. Today, young political consultants, I think they're taught to just, if you throw more money at it and move the polling, that's how you win. That's not how Mike Madrid learned. I learned at the foot of these old masters that would literally draw a roadmap of the exact number of votes that they were going to get in the exact media markets. And when you look at a race that way, especially with this new burgeoning Latino vote, 1-2 point margins are going to start becoming the norm that nobody is picking up in their polling. Nobody is anticipating because of this natural attrition, this natural change. There are wide segments of the Latino vote, 18 to 25, 18 to 27-year-old voters that have either voted once or have never voted that will be showing up in a presidential race that are not accounted for in either campaign's voter modeling. They are not accounted for in public opinion polling because anybody who's guessing at that isn't considered a real pollster. And I get it. It's that same thinking that created the problem with not identifying what was happening with new female registrants in 2022 that defended Democrats against this red wave. Is no pollster could put that in their model. They could not realign or recalibrate based on their gut. That's not scientific. The science was saying unless there's a 3, 4, 5 year trend of this stuff, we're not going to accommodate it. You can't do that when a wide swath of your new electorate is 18 to 25 years old and hasn't voted before. So those are the types of changes that we're going to start seeing. I don't want to call it a hidden Latino vote. I think I just going to call it an undercounting of a point or two of young people. A lot of people are saying it's a Gen Z vote. You can call it Gen Z if you want. It's overwhelmingly Latino, okay? Gen Z is a very diverse audience. It's not just a bunch of white kids in Ohio or Pennsylvania, to a lesser extent Montana, but things are changing, and the models that we have used in the past aren't capturing the full effects of this demographic change.
Now, for those of you who have been listening to this program over a year, what Mike just said is one of the most important things politically that we will talk about when we talk about models. That's a propensity of somebody to be a Democrat or Republican. There's turnout models, which is the propensity for them to vote. And y'all should just know that every campaign uses these, and a lot of campaigns use these too much when it comes to our vote, because I have found, Mike, in my own internal studies of the model, going back and checking it with live phone calls and door knocks to see for fact if it's true, are only about 50 to 60% correct when it comes to Latinos. When we're white voters, it's like 70, 80, 90% because they're more stable. They have a desktop. They own their own home. It's just easier to model a white voter. Mm-hmm. So you got to have some what we call cultural competency and your model, which is the Mike Madrid, the Chuck Roaches, the other great consultants that are out there, and a pollster and a modeler to make it exactly right, because you'll miss 30, 40% of the electorate. So that what Mike just said is one of the most important things that will be said on this podcast. As we wrap up this segment and this podcast this week, I really want you to be thinking about the Senate races where we know Arizona and Nevada is going to get a plethora. I love using plethora. Mike, did you ever see that old movie, The Three Amigos?
Yeah, of course. Steve Martin and
Martin Short.
Yeah, Martin Short. Yeah.
When there was a bad guy on there named El Guapo. Remember El Guapo?
Yeah.
He said, "Are you saying we have a plethora?" Yes, we have a plethora. Anyway, we're showing our age now, but I love using plethora. But there's going to be a plethora of Spanish language advertising done in Pennsylvania and Nevada. To remind all of you again, in the last election cycle, there was $30 million spent, in Spanish advertising, almost in just those two states. So there's no doubt that Democrats will do it again, because guess what? It helped them win, right? It was one of the reasons they won with white liberal voters and other voters. Like, just know that will happen. The real key will be, and we'll talk about this in depth throughout the year, how much Spanish spending, how much intentional spending is there done reaching our community in English and Spanish in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, in Ohio. Does somebody actually run a Spanish ad in Montana? That's what me and Mike Madrid are going to be monitoring. That's what we're going to be talking about, because I believe that's going to be the difference in who controls the Senate. We know that there's going to be an amazing amount of money spent. I hope, call Solidarity Strategies. We can help you spend that money in Arizona, Nevada. Call Mike Madrid like we're willing. But these other states are really where it's going to be interesting to see. As we wrap up this week, we really want to start putting a bigger emphasis on the website, which is Latinos with an S.vote. Mike talked about how we're going to have op-eds. Mike's got a lot of op-eds. There's lots of Latinos putting in there. We're going to start a partnership with some of these collegiate people that I want Mike to talk about in his closing comments today. But what we're trying to build there is a listserv of information where you can already go there every single day and get an aggregate of all the Latino vote news around the country for free, y'all. For free. You can go see every article every day about the Latino vote. Plus, you can see articles. You can see now, you're going to see the Ruben Gallego launch video. There's going to be nuggets like that put there for you every day. And we're going to have new partnerships that I want Mike to talk about, of like these intellectuals who think about this outside of the political brain, which I only have, which I think is going to give us another perspective. Mike, you got some thoughts on the website?
Yeah. And again, if you haven't visited the website, please do. And also offer us your suggestions. The idea here is to build a community. We've always talked about that. Chuck and I both have across party lines, but far bigger than that. I think those of you who listen to us know that, yeah, Chuck says blue Democrat as they come. I'm a Republican, have been for 30 years. We really care more about our community first and foremost. And so what we want to do is create a place for those top Latino journalists that will be coming to highlight their work, give them eyeballs. I think you guys can help out by amplifying their voice and sharing their work on covering the vote. We've also had some really fantastic talks with some professors that are going to be doing, creating a space for the academic research and the academic work that's coming out on the Latino vote, to give them a part of the audience that we're building, to just highlight each other, start building each other's voices, and start lifting each other up. As Chuck mentioned, there's a ton of aggregated news sources there where you can just get this one-stop shop, come and check it out every day and see all of these stories running regularly. To give you the best of what's going on. While we were talking today, Chuck, another idea is I think what we ought to do is we ought to start just looking at all these congressional, Senate, gubernatorial races based on the efficacy of the Latino vote. You and I can do that kind of analysis. We can do sort of the Cook report, the Sabatos crystal ball, but just do it from a Latino angle with the Latino vote.
Oh, that's a great idea.
I think we ought to do that too. Those are the types of ideas. It doesn't have to be just Chuck and I, by the way. We want people to be, if you've got ideas, and we've had some great listeners participate in this, give us some really tremendous ideas. Come in. There's a place for everybody. Check out the site, latinos.vote. If we're missing anything, let us know. If we're doing a great job, let us know. But if everything pans out the way that we're hoping it will by 2024, this is really going to be a central hub. It already is. It's already kind of the location for a lot of people that are coming for that information. But it can only get bigger. It can only get better. We need your help. We need your involvement. We want you to have a stake in this, because it's not about Chuck and Mike. It's about a community. It's about an emerging vote that is going to redefine American politics. And this, I think, is ground floor for all of us, listeners, guests, hosts, everybody who's involved. I'm just more excited about this now, Chuck, than when we launched a year ago.
Stay tuned. We're going to be coming up with lots of new ideas. Me and Mike are talking about putting together a live show, maybe where some of you audience members can come and watch me and Mike do the set live. We're talking about doing it this spring in Washington, D.C. Obviously, you've heard us today plan out our Vegas trip, where we're going to do one in Las Vegas at the annual Campaign and Elections Read Awards, probably in partnership with our sponsor, L2. But share. I need you to share the podcast, share the website. I need you to subscribe. I need you to become a Patreon member. Get some of those private conversations. But most of all, thank you for being a part of the Latino Vote family. And on behalf of Mike Madrid, our entire amazing production team that we do not talk enough about, again, all folks of color, all badass young brown and black people, thank you for making us look so good and sound so good every single day. And until next time, we'll see you on the backside.